of challenges of youth in the 21st century. Today, the topic is very interesting and many people can relate to it. And we have Sister Aisha who will be joining me in this dialogue. This program is constructed in such a way that there's a dialogue and the question answer sessions kind of relate to most of the things on the mind of audience. So Sister Aisha has done her MBA and currently working. Her main passion is to help young people find a way to become a problem solver rather than being a problem for the family, for the community, and for general. So welcome, Sister Aisha.
Thank you, Dr. Shahid, for giving me the opportunity to be part of this dialogue. I like this forum because it does not involve a nasiya or a to-do list. I like that it's a light session and it creates excitement amongst youth. And it inspires us to think as problem solvers. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with the first question. How do you define depression and anxiety? And are we talking about mental illness or are we just talking about normal feelings of depression and anxiety?
Thank you, Aisha. So anxiety and depressions are kind of normal feelings that we have. You know, we are anxious when we fear something unknown, something life-threatening or threatening. And we get depressed when we lose something. We feel helpless. So originally, right now we are talking about the whole spectrum. It's not just one point on a continuum. So on one extreme is the normal feeling. And when it keeps on repeating and becomes part of the personality, then it can lead to that anxiety and depression that most of the psychiatrists and psychologists will label it, where people are really pathologically depressed and anxious and they cannot function properly. So basically, anxiety and depression are the same thing from our point of view for today's discussion, because they can lead to these feelings lead one thing lead to another one.
Okay. How common is this in young Muslims?
Well, we unfortunately don't have the statistics that how much it's common in our teen and our young people. But you know, the first thing is how you define young. I mean, with what age we start the young age. To me, it's when a young person starts become conscious of their being, conscious of their feelings and thoughts. Normally, in an average, the the feelings, the abstract thinking starts at the age of 7 to 9. So basically, from 7 to 9, one becomes in that group where you can call a young person, and after that, it stays with you. You are young, even if you're close to all the way to 80s and 90s, even though the outer physical parts keeps on changing, but inside a person remains young. So how common it is in even in general population in America and Western societies, it's very common. The labeling of the pathological labeling of anxiety and depression, which has specific signs and symptoms and criteria to label it as an anxiety and depression, that's around 1 in 8. Like every eighth person has anxiety disorder, and depression is about 1 in 10. But to me, actually, it's more than that, because that is the extreme part. The other parts is a lot. I think every other person has some kind of anxiety and depression disorder. The way simple to find it out is that you should be doing things with energy. You're excited and you're happy. If you are not, the chances are you have some kind of anxiety and depression, and maybe the person has learned how to conceal those, but inside they might have anxiety and depression. To me, among the Muslims, actually, it is more than the population, especially among our sisters, the girls, they have more problem of anxiety and depression.
How does this impact daily life?
Well, the anxiety and depression basically, it's very contagious and infectious. When I say infectious, I mean it spreads. So if somebody has this anxiety disorder or depression disorder, they are going to impact the people around them. And so it spreads. You can see it's the opposite also the true. If somebody is happy, the happiness also spreads, and people kind of see the vibe. You might have seen that in a small room, when a child is playful and happy, everybody gets happier. The similar way, when we are anxious and we are depressed, the people around us get that vibe and they also get depressed. So first impact is that it affects the surrounding of the person. And then basically it affects the person in making the choices. And the important thing is why it becomes like that is because anxiety and depression are neural phenomena. It is the emotions which involves the neural circuit. So the neural circuits, that one nerve meets with another and the other nerve meets with another, and they are attached to some center in the brain. So these neural circuits, basically, if we keep on repeating them, and they are bypassing our cognition, that we are not aware of that becomes part of our personality. So that's another impact, that these things, if repeated, they become part of our personality. And the third important thing is, in the young age, we make most of our important choices. The choice of our profession, the choice of our spouse, choice of our the thing we want to do in life. So all those choices, and even at micro level, like the eating choices, or what kind of friends we are going to have, all those are being impacted by these anxiety and depression. So if we are doing the wrong choices, that will impact the whole life. So it is not that when you are anxious at that time, even if you outgrow it, because you were anxious and depressed in your youth, the choices the person made has been impacting later on. So it really impacts the whole life, even if you outgrow out of it.
So, what are the common signs and symptoms?
Well, in anxiety, basically, how we recognize it is that, if a thought comes to your mind subconsciously, the heart rate goes up, the heartbeat goes up. Any kind of fear, the phobias, they're all part of anxiety disorder. And similarly, when you feel helpless, you're withdrawn socially, you don't feel like making friendship with people or meeting other people, new people, and you kind of don't see life as worth living. And the extreme that leads to suicide ideation. So all these things are the signs symptoms of depression.
So, what leads to these conditions? Why is this so common?
Yeah, so Aisha, we have to see that why this is something very important to ponder, to think about, and find solutions for it. That why that is so common among our youth. I mean, ideally, a Muslim youth should be excited and energetic and passionate about things, what they are doing. I mean, especially in the West, we are given all the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all the things which people even crave to have, that we have all those things. I mean, if you go to the developing countries where most of the Muslims are living, I mean, even the weather becomes an enemy. When the hot weather comes or the cold weather comes, that affects their lives. And we have all those things very comfortably: the food, the living, the all kind of opportunities. So why a Muslim youth living in these countries have more incident of anxiety and disorder? So this is a very important part. I think the causes can be divided into basically two parts: internal and external. And the internal parts are those things which the person is doing with his own hand or her own hand, and that is leading to depression and anxiety. For example, food. We have all kinds of food available, but the increased sugar intake, when we eat more sweets, and the children are given sweets by everybody, the grandma, the family, every happy occasion we eat cakes. So all the time the sweet is something bombarded to the child, and all the packet food, the food industry has figured out how to attract the customer, how to sell more. So they put sugar in everything, whether you feel it or not. So that increased sugar, when gets into the body, it immediately has to be moved into the cells. The blood is just a fluid going everywhere in the body, but the cells have the packets in the instrument to get energy out of this sugar molecule, the glucose molecule. Now, the apparatus is inside the cell. So the body has devised a method how to move this sugar into the cell. So it creates insulin. Now, the moment our blood has more glucose, the body produces more insulin, and insulin moves this glucose into the cell. Now, as a result, even though we have taken more sugar, we get a little less sugar in the blood. Now, our brain, especially our brain, does not live without sugar because it has to work 24/7 whole year continuously. So it cannot stay without sugar, and it doesn't have any storage of sugar. So the moment there is sugar, less is sugar, the brain, the body thinks that there is an emergency. And in emergency, it produces those hormones: adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol. Now, these hormones creates an anxious environment inside. So the first environment is continuous taking sugar leads to anxiety. And it leads to an environment inside the body that can have the anxious anxiety environment inside the body. I call it chemical anxiety. So this is something which we are not aware of it. So most of the parents, they are happy when the children are getting those foods. Now, the second thing is the sleep, because our neurons in the central nervous system needs to take rest. Now, somehow the young people, they have the idea that if we want to be successful, they want to work hard, they have to be awake at night. So when you're taking tests, they want you to, you think that if you're working at night, you're a hardworking person. Somehow it has been romanticized about being awake at night. Now, in the early part of the night, actually, there are certain growth hormones are produced. There are certain chemicals the body decides about resting. So that important part is lost by the young people. So as a result, the neurons become more irritable, and that also leads to anxiety and depression. The third factor, the internal factor, is lack of exercise. And when I say exercise, any exercise that challenges your heart to move faster, stronger, that exercise. So the young people, since they are always in front of computer, they are always, even there nowadays, the studies are in computer, and then their recreation is in the form of computer, their communication, their socialization. Unfortunately, pandemic probably has added to it, this COVID-19. So the screen time, that also leads to kind of this environment that makes the neurons irritable, and that leads to anxiety and disorders and the other depression. So these are the things: the food, sleep, lack of exercise, and screen. These are the internal factors that are leading our young people to more and more tendency to have anxiety and depression disorder.
So does this have anything to do with genes?
That's an interesting question. So, we see that the parents who have some kind of anxiety and depression, their children also have that. But I would say that this is mostly a myth. There is some element of truth in it. However, nowadays there is a new science which is called epigenetics. Now, epigenetics means that even if you are born with genetics of anxiety and depression, it will not express itself, it will not manifest itself unless you have those environments. And unfortunately, we not only inherit the genes from our parents, we also inherit the environment in which they expose us to. So I think it is the environment which has a stronger effect. Like, if somebody has a genes of anxiety and depression, they are a vulnerability. Now, if they are also exposed to food, sleep deprivation, lack of exercise, more screen, they will be among the colleagues, among the same age group, will be more vulnerable, easily vulnerable to anxiety and depression. So that's the role of genes. I think we have to focus on those things which we are in our control. Because when we assign genetics to a disease and problem, that means we can't do anything unless we change the genes. So I think we should be more focusing on those areas which are in our control.
So, as you mentioned before, what are the external factors?
That's very like intriguing kind of things, the external factors for young people. I would say that first external factor comes from parents and immediate family. The contradictions and conflicts among parents and the immediate family. That is the strongest triggering factor for anxiety and depression, especially the first generation migrants who come from other countries to this country in pursuit of happiness and American dream or all kinds of things. They are busy in their things, but at the same time they have problems. They have cultural shocks. They don't want their kids to be assimilated. At the same time, they want them to be successful. So all those contradictions come to the young person who is going into school, sees the values among his or her peers, and don't know what to do. So these dilemmas and contradiction and conflicts actually trigger sometime the feeling of anxiety. Sometimes you want to hide from your parents that they may get panic. This hiding things keeps on hide and seek thing keep on going, and something happens, and then you decompress, and the person starts showing the signs of anxiety and depression. So far, they have learned how to conceal it. Similarly, the community, our community, the Muslim community, they have certain elements in it, and the high mark. If you say the remarkable thing about the community is when they interact with young people, they have some kind of judgmental way of looking at young people. If some auntie wears hijab and somebody doesn't wear hijab, immediately the first thought comes, oh, this young child is going to go in this direction. And similar, I'm just giving one example. The judgmental way of looking at our youth, that is our community issue. They have to solve this, the problem, the community way of interacting with young people. And the third, another external factor is the general society. There is the media is talking about Islam and Islamophobes, and the racism is there. Of course, there are problems in the society uh, apart from the Muslims. So when the Muslim youth is interacted with that, and at the same time they have this dual kind of personality, so all these things leads to those anxiety and depression states.
So, what should a young person do about it?
Yeah, that's a million-dollar question. What a young person should do about it. Um, I mean, first of all, I also feel myself young. So I would say anybody who is conscious about their thinking, but especially the people who are just joining the adulthood, I think they should be focusing on what is in their control. If you focus on what is in your control, start doing things properly, gradually you have a control in your life. You assume, you kind of assert yourself. So otherwise you remain passive with the environment. The circumstances will move you from one place to other place with this vulnerability of anxiety and depression. So I think they can figure out, they can make a list of things where they can intervene. First of all is the food. Let's decrease our sugar intake. That's in our hand. There might be cravings. Well, that's another sign of problem, because there are some compensatory mechanism. If somebody is eating more, that is also a sign of compensation, because we don't want to feel depressed. So by eating more, actually we bring our dopamine level up and we feel better. So if you see somebody eating more, or somebody shopping, or using screen more, because they want to get away from this internal anxiety and depression state and become mindless. So that mindlessness actually comes from that. So let's increase our sugar intake and animal origin food intake. The second thing which can bring our nerves more vulnerable to anxiety and depression is animal origin food. Too much animal origin food. So let's decrease that amount. Let's decrease the amount of sugar in our food. That's in our hand. The second thing is we make sure that we go to sleep early. Normally, I would say after Isha, one should either read with the book, but don't use the screen. And after 1 or 2 hours, within 1 or 2 hours after Isha, go to sleep. So that's the best way you can really undo the effects of all the factors by sleeping in the early part of the night. And the third is we should do exercises. Any exercise, the aerobic exercise. It's not the making your muscles better and the losing weight and body. No, exercise is useful for anxiety and depression. That exercise, and the studies have proven it. The best antidepressant is aerobic activity. Now, when I say aerobic activity, that actually means at least you should have 70 to 80% of your maximum heart rate. And how you count maximum heart rate? 220 minus age. Very simple. 220 minus age, that is your maximum heart rate. You should at least have 70 to 80% of that maximum heart rate during that exercise. If you attain that 2, 3, 4 times a day, the chances of anxiety and depression will gradually come out of your life. You will assert yourself. And the last but not the least thing which is in our control is the screen, use of screen. Let's use the screen because you have to use it for education, for communication, for connecting with others, or information, but let's not use it for recreation. Let's have non-digital recreation non-digital recreation in our life. Like, you can have talk with your family, with your friends face to face, not on FaceTime. And similarly, maybe we can have a sports. There are so many sports, and actually ICLI is very good in advancing those things. So we should be trying to have non-recreational, non-digital recreation in our life. So that's, and reading books from the book, not from the screen. So that will also help us undo the negative impacts of this anxiety and depression and all the other factors that are involving our life. So this is something which we can do. Another thing we can do is make a list of small actions. I call it small action checklist for the young people. For example, you can go to your mom and maybe see how you can help her, maybe give her a little massage. Small action. Similarly with your dad. And you can help your sibling to study something. Go to kitchen, clean it. Learn how to cook something. So all those small actions, clean the living room. So those, make a list of small actions, do those small actions, because the action actually undoes the anxiety and depression state. And lastly, but not the least, the most important thing, is our Islam gives us a clear way of living in which there is no anxiety and depression. If there is a solution. For example, in Quran, Allah says, "Allah bi zikrillahi tatma'innal qulub." Now, this word Allah means that beware, mind you, make sure that you understand this, that without zikr of Allah, you cannot get peace, tranquility, serenity, ecstasy. You cannot get any of those happiness without the zikr of Allah. Now, that doesn't mean only that you cannot get it. That means if you try to get these things from any other thing other than Allah's zikr, you will not be able to achieve that. Now, the question is, what is zikr of Allah? Traditionally, we think we take a tasbih or bead and we say Allah, Allah, Subhanallah, Subhanallah. Well, that's also one way of remembering Allah, but that's a token. That's a training. The real zikr of Allah is reminding ourselves that we have been created by a creator, being conscious of Allah, talking about Allah, thinking about Allah, feeling about Allah. Now, when we think in our loneliness, and interesting thing is this zikr is so easy to do. You don't have to make even ablution for that. You are sitting and you can do that. You can just think about it. You don't have to use Arabic words for that. You don't have to learn any specific thing for that. You can just think about it. And these are natural questions in every human being's mind. Who is my creator? Who created me? And what are his characteristics, his sifat? And then why he sent me to this life? Isn't that a normal question everybody should be asking? And is the death end of life, or there is a life after that? And when we go in that life, what are the way we can be successful? Now, these are the normal questions. Anything related to these questions, we are thinking, talking, learning, that is zikr of Allah. And then zikr of Allah is also in the Muslim's life is always there. You know, everything we do, we start with our right hand and we say Bismillah. And we drink something, we say Bismillah. We have eaten something, we say Alhamdulillah. When we wake up in the morning, we have dua. If we see a beautiful child, we say MashaAllah. You know, when we use these words, Inshallah, MashaAllah, Alhamdulillah, let's understand the meaning. We should mean it, not just saying it. So all these things bring zikr of Allah in our life. That means no matter what happens in the world, no matter what happens in our circumstances, there is a power to help us. There is someone we can look towards. There is, we are going all the time towards him. There is no way we can avoid that. So zikr of Allah is, in a Muslim youth life, will change the whole thing. No matter what happens, whatever you do, whatever is the outcome, doesn't matter. Allah is always there for you. So Allah bi zikrillahi tatma'innal qulub. That's why the Quran is also a zikr of Allah. If you look at the Quran, basically it is the answer of these 5 questions. So anytime you read Quran, read it with translation. And the best way of zikr of Allah is prayer. Best way. Because, you know, that is kind of brings all your body language is actually saying those things which you want to say with words. The feelings of gratitude and the standing with respect and being awake and being in the moment. So that's how I think the young people can start from simple thing of food, sleep, exercise, screen, small checklist, and then add in their life zikr of Allah.
And lastly, Dr. Shahid, nowadays there's a lot of talk about yoga and meditation. What do you think about that?
Well, yoga and meditation, you're right. I mean, among the Westerners, the spiritual thirst they have, because, you know, basically the Western culture and civilization is based on this very fact that life ends at death. So let's maximize to earn and live comfortably. And since we are now part of that culture somehow or the other, even if we are living in those countries, we still look towards this kind of civilization and culture in our life, that will automatically depress us. So the Western nowadays are very much impressed by yoga and meditative activities. See, they have a deficiency, so they look for how to quench that thirst. If somebody has vitamin B12 deficiency, they will show the signs, and you give them vitamin B12 and they get better. So the reason it is more popular, the yoga and meditation in the West, is because they are deficient in spiritually. They have spiritual deficiency, and when they interact and come across with yoga and meditation, basically what is yoga and all kinds of meditation, that leads you to the state of mind in which you are in the present moment. So our mind is continuously being bombarded with the unpalatable and bitter experiences of the past, and it is being like attacked by the fears of what would happen in the next moment, in the future. So we don't enjoy our present moment. And this yoga and meditative states and activity and exercises bring you in that moment. So that's why it has become popular. And the way they mostly do this is through breathing exercises and being in the postures. Basically, these are the 2-3 ingredients of yoga and meditation, that they bring you in certain postures, and they ask you to breathe in a way that you are breathing consciously, and that brings you in that moment. So if somebody wants to calm down through those states, that's fine, because this is human experience. It has nothing to do with any religion, Buddha or Hindus or Sikh. No, it has nothing to do. This is human experience of learning how to bring one's mind into the present moment. But I have done research on these, and I have found that prayer, our salah, is the best find of possible meditative state. You can acquire it, but you have to work on it. You have to bring some breathing in it. You have to learn all the postures in properly. Now, I have studied different kinds of meditative methods and yoga, and I found there are simple, those postures, like, they teach you how to stand. No, in prayer, we stand, relaxed and stand, don't we? And then they teach you how to bow, the bending at the hip joint. Don't we have ruku? And then they teach you, when you move from one point to the other point, you have to inhale and exhale. Every time we move from one point to the other, we say something. So like we say Allahu Akbar. Anytime we say something, we are exhaling. So we exhale. So we are calm, we are relaxed, we are moving. And then there is one position in yoga in which they do, their head is in the lowest part of the body. So they call it inversion. So they teach you how to do inversion, different stages and different asanas. So we have sajda, the best form in which the whole body is flexed, and still we are saying something, that means we are exhaling. And then they teach you how to sit. And the sitting posture is the best, in which your maximum part of the surface area is attached to the earth. And if you look at how we sit in our attahiyat, is like that. So as a matter of fact, we have really ignored, we read namaz traditionally, culturally, habitually. We really don't work on our postures, on our breathing, on our bringing our mind to the one mind. So I think if we work on the prayer, we can get the best meditative state. But if somebody wants to learn through yoga and meditative state, I think that will also help. So these are the things we can do for finishing, for undoing the impacts of anxiety and depression we have. And of course, if somebody has suicidal ideation, immediately that person should contact some healthcare and seek help. I mean, our mosque, actually, our Islamic centers should be the source of these these things, that there is anybody wants to help, there is some person to contact. And I think the Islamic Center should start changing their role. The first important thing is to get data. We really don't have data about our young people. Uh, the data collection is very important so that we can do studies. We can find out, we should have statistics in our hands. How many people are stressful? What are their characteristics? We should have all kinds of studies originating from our Islamic centers. This is the real work of the Islamic centers in the Western systems, that should be the source of information about our youth, not just giving them advice or pushing them into do this and do that, and always thinking about them judgmentally. So I think we have to start gradually changing the role of our Islamic centers. Now, I think we can let ask the audience if they have any questions. Is there any questions? Okay, so there's one question. Do you think our diet is causing sadness and anxiety? If it is, what can we do to avoid these issues, especially on our youth? Thank you, Sister Naid. Yes, as I mentioned earlier, that diet has very important role in creating this environment. And the main thing, two things I would like to have. One is to decrease the sugar content. The other is to decrease the animal origin food. And probably the third one is to having a proper hydration. The water is very important. Dehydrated cells, they are also vulnerable for anxiety and depression. Thank you for this question, reminding us the diet role. Okay, there is another question. ADHD, depression, anxiety to help me focus even though I take meds, but it doesn't help. Anxiety affects my mental health and depression makes me feel sad all the time. That's a very interesting thing. The ADHD, this ADHD labeling is done on children because, they're hyperactive, they cannot focus. The original reason for this, most of these patients, if you look at that in the childhood, they have lots of sugar intake. And when you take into the child psychologist, they will say, okay, the person is ADHD and starts giving them stimulants. No, those stimulants are very dangerous. They should be given as a last resort. And amphetamine, those stimulants are really, and they don't help focus. So, brother, I would recommend that look at your food, make sure you have non-screen, non-digital recreation, do some exercise, and make a checklist of small things where you don't have to focus. Help your family in the kitchen and do small things. Put the garbage out. Make a checklist of 10 things. So whenever you feel that you're not focusing, do those small things. This is what I would recommend. And make sure that you sleep early part of the night. I'm 100% sure that if somebody follows these small things, whatever labels the psychiatrists have put on them, it will gradually get better. Can we use honey instead of sugar? Yes, we can use honey, and the honey means the honey which we get from the market, not the honey our spouses. Okay, so yes, we can use them, but still it has to be moderate with moderation. Honey is a natural sugar, so it has antioxidants in it. It has antibacterial things in it. So if you have to use sometime, use it, but don't use it, overuse it. I think few tablespoonful, 1 to 2 in a day, that will really be good for everyone. And so instead of sugar, you can also use, there are now herbs that are sweet, and they don't harm. They have 0 calories. You can use them if you have to make some sweet for your children. So, Sister Aisha, anything else? I mean, you asked very good
No,
questions.
nothing else. That was all. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I think if there is no questions, you can always contact us through email, through Islamic Center of Long Island. Um, uh, actually, based on these important things, I have created a program for young people, which includes 80 years old young too, a well-being program. And if you want to join that program, you're always welcome. Just you can reach me through ICLI or Dr. Shahid maintenance of wellbeing mwb@gmail.com. And if there is no question, thank you very much for joining us. Okay, there is one question. What are the best ways to cope with depression? We have already mentioned that whenever there is a feeling of depression, you think there is depression in a young person, or you are feeling depression, start looking at those things which are in your control before you resort to medications. Remember, antidepressant medications, they have lots of side effects. And interestingly, all the antidepressant medication, their side effect starts the moment you swallow them, but their good results will come after 3-4 weeks. And especially if somebody is a little older, that also they have cardiac issues and all other issues, their side effects profile is quite long. So before you resort to those side effects, think about the things you can do. So divide them into two things: one, small things; the other, spiritual things. So the spiritual thing is zikr of Allah, thinking about Allah, feeling gratitude about what Allah has given us. Just using reading Quran with meaning. So all those things are zikr of Allah. And the other side, the physical side, look at your food and take out at least for a few weeks, take out all the sugar and carbohydrates, just for to renew your taste buds. And then you can add a little bit of honey and a little bit of other sweets in it, or the carbs in it. And then decrease the animal origin food. Make sure you sleep every day, even on the weekends. No matter what happens, you are sleeping after Isha, few hours after Isha, and not using screen for your recreation. And then think about doing some exercise. Starts with a simple walk, and then have a bike, or maybe join a gym, and focus on aerobics rather than weightlifting and other stuff. So I think if somebody does these things, the depression has to go. Our body has all kinds of problems. The body has the ability to undo all those problems. You see, the medical industry, it's an industry. It's no more just helping others through medicine. It is mainly an industry. And the industry has to survive and make profit. So if you go on that line, then you will end up taking all those medications. Yes, at the time of need, there's a severe depression, and you cannot do even those things. Maybe in the beginning, you can have those medications if there is a severe pathological depression. But if there is just feeling of sadness, or you are on the continuum and you have not been labeled depression by the psychiatrist, you can do these things. And I assure you that depression will gradually come out of your life. Okay, what about marijuana for depression? Well, the marijuana has become very popular nowadays. In America, this is a very interesting story how the drugs become unpopular and then they become popular. If you follow the dollar amount, you will see how they become popular. There was time for every little pain, they wanted us doctors to prescribe opioids. They say it is human rights for pain. You have to do pain medication. So we started giving, and then they came extremely to the others. Now, anybody who prescribes opioids, they are under microscope. Why are you prescribing it? So what has happened in the beginning? The pharmaceutical company earned a lot of money and they gave taxes to the government. So the government kept quiet and all those things. But when there were so many deaths by overdosage, they stopped these opioids. And now comes the marijuana. Of course, the marijuana has become very popular because it does not cause overdosage death. But as far as its other side effects are concerned, there are really quite side effects of marijuana. One thing is that it has some role in certain ailments, not for depression, but for pain. It has some role. If you take the extracts out of marijuana and the CBD and the other, there are different ingredients, like more than 100 ingredients in marijuana. So they have extracted, and if you know the extraction is done properly with a standard, and you use them, that will help you in certain ailments, certain diseases they are used. It's not the time to go over that. But marijuana, I would not use for marijuana for depression. I would rather use those physical things for combining with depression, because it is known to, especially the young people, it is known to arrest the neural circuits. And we keep on developing our neural circuits till, like 40s and 50s nowadays, they are saying. All our life we keep on, our brain keeps on changing. People has a wrong notion about our brain, that it stops developing. It keeps on changing. This concept is called neuroplasticity. So marijuana has some side effects on those effects, and it has been shown by studies that the IQ gets lower by using marijuana. So I think unless you are under a supervision of a doctor who thinks that your specific problem can be handled by a specific ingredients from marijuana, use that. Otherwise, I won't use for marijuana for depression. So thank you very much for joining this interesting session, and hopefully we'll see you next month or following month with a new talk. Any of the young people, if they want to join in our dialogue, please let us know. We are always looking for young people to join the dialogue, because these sessions are meant for you. So you should stand up and participate in it. Thank you very much.